If you're into Berserk and the dark fantasy genre as much as we are, Claymore is a series that will definitely scratch your itch. It has everything from grotesque monsters to a grim dark world as its setting to a protagonist that carries a gigantic sword. This isn't to say that Claymore is another cheap knockoff of Berserk. In fact, Claymore is the work of acclaimed mangaka Norihiro Yagi, and it made its debut in the monthly Shonen Jump magazine in June 2001. It continued to be published for the next 13 years up until October 4th, 2014. It would also receive an anime adaptation of 24 episodes, which would cover the first 11 volumes of the manga. In a space dominated by Berserk, comparisons were inevitable, and although it is much beloved and appreciated by fans, Claymore has continued to live in its shadows. We at Marvelous Anime think this show deserves to be highlighted and discussed in length as it's based on a richly crafted, lore-filled world with intriguing characters and antagonists. Claymore is set in a medieval fantasy world that is divided into 47 districts. Each of these districts is under the unofficial protection of the Claymores, a group of female warriors that specialize in fighting monsters called the Yoma who feed on humans. These warriors are created by a dubious organization that claims to do so to champion humanity in their struggles against these fiends. They are ranked according to their power levels, with the strongest Claymore being ranked 1 and the weakest being ranked 47. The story follows the adventure of the 47th ranked warrior Claire as she sets out on a quest for vengeance against Priscilla, the entity that murdered her adopted mother Teresa. While at first the series might seem like just another seinen show with mature themes of gore and violence, it soon shows the audience that it has a much more profound depth to it. It also explores the themes of loss and existential crisis at a meta level. The series takes the audience through a world full of deceit and lies. As the curtains are lifted towards the end, we're left to wonder if Priscilla was the real villain of the series, or if she was just another victim of the conspiracies of those who created her. Priscilla is a former Claymore who transforms into a monster, transcending every other creature of her kind before her after going berserk while fighting against Teresa. Despite being a kind-hearted soul with a naive sense of justice, her mental fragility costs her her humanity, as once a Claymore awakens, which is what transforming into a monster is called, they can never go back to being humans again. They're cursed to roam the earth, becoming the very things that they hunt and feasting on the innards of the people they swore to protect. When a powerful Claymore loses control, she transforms into what is known as an awakened being. However, when the number 1 warrior awakens, they're even stronger and are classified as an abyssal one. Priscilla, despite being just a rank 2 warrior during her awakening, transforms into a being far more powerful than even the abyssal ones. If she hadn't lost control and continued to stay a Claymore, she had the potential to become the greatest Claymore in all of history, but fate had other plans. Hers is a story of tragedy and sorrow, even more so than perhaps that of the main protagonist, Claire. In this video, we'll be discussing everything you need to know about Priscilla. We'll be leaving no stone unturned, including her origin, motivations, powers, and other attributes. Join us as we delve into how a young girl who had the potential to be a goddess on the battlefield instead transformed into the devil incarnate. This is the story of Priscilla, the being that transcends even the abyssal ones. What is a Claymore? Before we delve into the character of Priscilla, it's important to understand what a Claymore is. For those new to the series, we're going to give you a brief overview, and we plan to do a longer video explaining their nature in depth soon. Claymores are taken as children, often orphaned due to attacks caused by the Yoma, or even, in some cases, forcibly separated from their families, and they're conditioned since infancy to be supremely obedient servants of the organization. They are brainwashed to the point that they're okay with turning their blades against their own comrades if ordered to do so by the organization. Claymores are enhanced warriors that usually have the viscera of the very Yoma they hunt embedded into them through horrifying medical procedures. The mutations grant them special abilities, enhanced senses, increased physical attributes, and access to Yoma abilities. Their physical appearance also changes, with them gaining blonde hair and silver irises, along with extremely pale skin. For this reason, they are also called the silver-eyed witches by normal humans. Although they have a strict rule against harming humans, which is punishable by death, the regular populace shuns them as mutants and outcasts. Their presence isn't welcome except when absolutely required, as they are feared for their mysterious nature. The name Claymore is also a name given to them by the public due to the weapons they carry, which they have adopted. Outside of that, they have regular human names. Claymores are also all females other than the very first generation, who were male and considered failures as they were too unstable and hard to control. We'll discuss why this was in the next section of the video, but other than the fact that they're all females, in most regards, they're also very similar to the Witchers from the novels by Andrzej Sapkowski. At any given time, there are 47 different active claymores designated to patrol a district per individual. As mentioned earlier, they're ranked according to their power levels, which are determined by the organization. Every time one of them perishes, another female warrior is added to their ranks, as the organization has a multitude of candidates in their system under training at all times. It's not always necessary for the warrior ranked below the deceased individual to be ranked up. It's the organization's prerogative whether they choose to promote someone or introduce someone entirely new that they feel is worthy of that rank. Every claymore gains some unique trait or ability once they undergo the procedure that turns them into half-breeds. The top 15 warriors of the organization in particular are shown as standing head and shoulders above the rest, with the gap between the top 3 and everyone else being even greater than that. These higher-ranked warriors often have innate powerful abilities with regard to their energy and swordsmanship, with one complementing and augmenting the other. The number 1 ranked claymore of their time is often regarded as the greatest warrior of her generation. Her prowess with the sword and her reserves of Yoki energy are considered to be so overpowered that her awakening, which we're going to discuss later in the video, is considered to be a calamitous occasion. To put things into context, if the organization wanted to kill their number 1 ranked warrior, they'd have to send all their single-digit ranked warriors, and it still probably wouldn't be enough. A top-ranked claymore is even able to go toe-to-toe with the higher tier of Yomas, known as the Awakened Ones. What are the origins of Priscilla? Priscilla was born in a tiny town named Musha in the southern parts of the realm. She lived in a relatively happy family with her father, older brother, and sister. She is shown as a lively, innocent child. One day, tragedy strikes her hometown when people begin to die one by one with their guts being seemingly ripped out. As the townsfolk suspect it to be the work of a Yoma, they devise a method to smoke out the monster. Yomas have an insatiable appetite for the innards of a human being and are capable of taking human form so as to blend in with their prey. In order to discover the Yoma amongst them, it's decided that every family would have to live confined within a safe house prepared for this purpose for an entire fortnight. The idea was that if the Yoma belonged to the quarantined family, it would not be able to endure its hunger for 2 whole weeks and would reveal itself. When the turn came for Priscilla's family, all seemed normal until one night she would awake to find her father feeding on the corpses of her siblings, unable to contain his hunger any longer. This was only the beginning of Priscilla's trauma, as she would go on to decapitate her father with the weapon that every quarantined family was provided in case the Yoma was one of their own. As the days passed, the villagers began to grow suspicious since there was no activity within the house that could be seen or heard. Soon, the stench of death and decay began emanating from the house, and their worst fears were confirmed. Too scared to investigate and open the door, fearing for their lives and being superstitious, the villagers would begin avoiding the house, even stopping the daily supply of food they provided for its inhabitants. They would be completely unaware of the young girl still alive within the walls of the house. For days, Priscilla would claw at the door of the house and shout for help, even as she was surrounded by the decaying bodies of her loved ones. It's heavily suggested that she resorted to cannibalizing the body of her Yoma father to survive. She survived in this manner for almost a month before she was found by the people of the organization who were called in by the townsfolk to finally investigate the house. Much of her memory of this period of her life was suppressed due to her trauma, especially the part where she cannibalized her father. She was then taken in by the organization and joined others like her to be turned into the organization's warriors. When the audience is initially introduced to her, we're told that her battle prowess is so extraordinary that despite being a relatively new recruit, she has already been ranked as the new number 2 of the group. She's sent out to hunt the former number 1 ranked warrior, Teresa of the Faint Smile, who had broken the cardinal rule of killing a normal human being. She had done so to protect the protagonist of the story, Claire, from bandits who were going to harm her because she had developed a close bond with her. In retaliation, the organization had sent not just Priscilla, but also the rest of the top 5 warriors, Eilina, Sophia, and Noelle. Unable to best Teresa in combat despite their combined might, Priscilla begins tapping further into her Yoma side. It isn't long before she begins losing her humanity in exchange for tremendous power as she taps into her massive Yoki reserves. Even then, she's not able to kill Teresa, who fights with just 10% of her own powers unleashed. Finally, reaching the point of no return, she fully awakens and catches Teresa off guard, killing her instantly. This was the second birth of Priscilla, the one who would go on to be the strongest monster in the world, more powerful than even the abyssal ones. There were only 3 known abyssal ones at the beginning of the story, and they were so powerful that they ruled the northern, southern, and western parts of the land, unopposed by all. Priscilla was at a power level far exceeding even these beings, despite being a rank 2 soldier when she went through her awakening. This is how she came to be the strongest awakened being in all of Claymore. What does Priscilla look like? As a child, Priscilla had auburn hair and brown eyes. This is a form she reverts back to once she awakens and begins suffering from self-induced amnesia. As a Claymore, her hair is blonde like the others and she has silver eyes. She has pale skin, just like her peers, and wears her hair in a bob cut style. Priscilla also dons the standard white suit made out of spandex-like material with a black neck area where her emblem is embossed. She wears dark gray pauldrons on her shoulders and van braces of the same material on her arms. She wears armored boots and a backplate meant to protect the top of her back, along with a short gray cape that flows from it. Finally, she has hip guards of the same build and color on either side of her hips. In her awakened form, she resembles a demonic angel with ashen purple skin. Unlike the other abyssal and awakened ones, her body doesn't undergo any grotesque transformation. She retains a humanoid form, including much of her facial features pre-awakening. She has a single horn protruding out of her forehead, and her eyes change from the silver irises of a Claymore to the malevolent yellow of a Yoma. Her body is a mix of both an exoskeleton and reptilian features. She has large wings made out of the same tissue that her body is composed of. There are protrusions running along the ridge of her arms, and her legs seem to be reinforced by the same exoskeleton-type material. Her feet transform from their normal human shape to appear clawed like a beast. Her appearance is meant to act as a foil to Claire and Teresa's true awakening, where she resembles a divine being with feathered wings. These are further accentuated when she enrages and enters her final form. What is Priscilla's motivation and personality? As a Claymore, Priscilla is introduced as a klutz with a shy and nervous personality in front of her peers. This all changes when she's battling the Yoma, or people who she considers villains. In combat, she's the exact opposite, displaying a confident personality and a ruthless streak. Her motivation to join the Claymores is the destruction of all Yomas. However, due to her youth and inexperience, she is extremely fragile mentally. Even though in combat she's deadly and able to combat powerful foes without having to rely on her Yoki, she is easily flustered and provoked. Priscilla is shown to have a strong sense of justice and honor in her fight against Teresa. Even though Priscilla blindly believes the commands of the organization, she tries to give Teresa the courtesy of one-on-one combat as honor dictates among warriors. It is only when her entire party, including herself, is overwhelmed by Teresa that she gives in to Eilina, chastising her for being naive and apologizing to her foe before attacking as a group. Her naivete is her biggest undoing, as she can't wrap her head around the fact that someone she considers a wrongdoer is able to be stronger than her. This causes her to lose control, turning her into the very thing she loathes and hunts. Upon awakening, she is shown as having an aloof personality, fully aware of her overwhelming power. She develops a sadistic personality, craving the innards of all humans as Yoma do. Her preferred prey are young men and women, followed by little boys when asked about it by her creator, Day. This is revealed to be because at the moment of her awakening, the last remaining vestiges of her human side managed to plant a wedge in her psyche that made her ignore little girls. She did this in the hopes that one day a Claymore would arise and kill her, ending her existence as the Yoma she so detests. We retroactively find out that this is the reason she didn't attack Claire and walked past her after she had murdered Teresa. At the same time, she meets Isley, the Abyssal One of the North, and after besting him in battle, he swears his fealty to her. At the same time, she begins to regress into a small child, seemingly losing her memories due to her self-imposed amnesia. In this state, her character completely resembles a child, and although she sticks with Isley, she shows no particularly strong attachments towards him. The first time she shows strong attraction and attachment towards anyone is when she meets a young boy named Raki. She becomes fiercely protective of him and seems to only listen to the boy. She claims to like his smell as he carries the lingering scent of Teresa from Claire on him, although she doesn't realize this immediately. This is because Claire and Raki have spent a lot of time together in the past. During this time, Priscilla is also shown shedding tears for the deaths of the 24 Claymores as she observes their Yoki being snuffed out one after another. It isn't clear what evokes this emotion in her, but it's speculated perhaps it was her human subconscious that momentarily surfaced due to her amnesia. She even aids Rocky in identifying hidden Yomas and threatens those who would harm him. For most of the series, we don't see Priscilla as a voracious eater, and it is mentioned that she hadn't eaten humans for an extremely long time, especially during her travels with Raki. This is especially unique and strange for a voracious eater because, as their name suggests, it should be next to impossible for someone like them to go without feeding for so long. This all changes when she encounters the awakened form of Rafaela and Luciella, from whom she gains the same scent that she smells on Rocky. Finally, she revealed to Rocky that she had, in fact, been using him to get closer, and finally, with her target so close, she abandoned him. However, before she does leave, she helps Rocky overcome the parasitic rods of this new abyssal one that had impaled him on his shoulder as gratitude for his companionship. There are two interesting things that happen here. First, we get to see that Priscilla is capable of both deceit and gratitude. The reason this is interesting is twofold. The reason is that in the same scene, she shows both a negative emotion and a positive one, which is a juxtaposition to the confusion deep within her subconscious that she never truly overcame. Such is her hatred towards the Yoma that, despite becoming one, she can never truly embrace it in her core fully. This is further supported by what we mentioned earlier when she places a wedge in her subconscious against attacking young girls. The other reason why this is interesting is that she has no reason to display deceit or gratitude, as she is so strong that she's basically a transcendental being. The morality of mere mortals holds no meaning to her, but she displays it regardless. In the very end, as she battles Teresa, we are told that the emotion that fueled Priscilla was her intense hatred. Hatred towards a fate bestowed on her, the Yoma, weakness compared to Teresa, and most of all, her hatred towards herself for becoming a Yoma. In a moment of clarity in her death throes, Priscilla divulges that all her actions had been motivated by her seeking death to end her misery. As she is finally destroyed by Teresa, she apologizes for all the misery she caused. Even if Priscilla was the strongest being to ever exist, that doesn't equate to the most evil. An argument can instead be made to say that she was, in fact, the most tragic. Her life was filled with nothing but tragedy, and her naivete and sense of honor and justice, however misguided, ultimately led her down a path to become the very thing she hated. If Day's words are to be believed, a Claymore's strength is affected by the level of hatred they hold towards the Yoma. This, in turn, determines their powers as an awakened being. For Priscilla to become a being transcending even the abyssal ones and her meteoric rise to the second rank, great indeed, it must have been her hatred towards the Yoma that made her transformations a greater tragedy. What are Priscilla's attributes and powers? Even as a Claymore, Priscilla was an extraordinary warrior. Her prowess was such that even Teresa acknowledged her potential to surpass her one day. With her limitless potential finally unleashed and amplified when she awakened, she truly deserved the title of the strongest being, far surpassing even the abyssal ones. As such, these are some of her attributes and powers that we feel are worth mentioning. Precise Yoki Control. Yoki is the energy that courses through the bodies of all Yoma and Claymores. It's very similar to the concepts of ki and internal energy that allows them access to superhuman moves and powers. Despite ultimately losing control of her Yoki and awakening, Priscilla's Yoki Control is second only to Teresa's. As a Claymore, she's able to fight hordes of Yoma without unleashing a single percent of her Yoki. Her proficiency in controlling her Yoki is seen when she's able to take it to the point that even someone who's more proficient in the art than her, like Teresa, is unable to sense it. Her control over her Yoki is so great that even Rafaela, who is widely considered the greatest at suppressing Yoki, was nothing compared to her. It is widely suspected that her technique was not simply Yoki suppression. Priscilla is speculated to have been able to control the output of Yoki right from the start by completely extinguishing it or releasing it in increments from 0 to 100. This would explain why Teresa was able to sense Rafaela, but not Priscilla. Although struggling, she was seen keeping her mind together even though she was well past the 80% of her powers awakening. It is only when she's finally at the point of no return that she awakens, giving in to her emotions. Even when she awakens, she's able to temper her awakened form to resemble a humanoid. She is also able to keep her hunger along with her other Yoma tendencies in check for several years, and this can all be attributed to her ability to control the Yoki flowing through her. Her mastery over Yoki doesn't just extend to controlling, she also senses the Yoki in others to an astounding degree. Even in her weaker form, she's able to sense the Yoki of several Claymores and accurately absorb them from several miles away. When in combat, after regaining her true strength, she's able to track not only the Yoki of an awakened Cassandra, but also of the 7 other Claymores and several other awakened beings all at once. Infinite mass creation. One of the reasons why Priscilla is so formidable in combat after awakening is her near instantaneous healing factor. While it is true that all Yoma can regenerate lost limbs and body parts, with the awakened and the abyssal ones being more proficient at it, Priscilla's healing factor is so strong it puts her leagues above the rest. Compared to her fighting style as a Claymore, where she relied on dodging and timed attacks, as an awakened being, she's seen taking hits recklessly owing to this power. In her battle against Isley, even though he manages to destroy both her arms and impales her through the torso, she simply regenerates and overwhelms him. This is seen again in her battle against the Destroyer and the awakened being that resembles Reeful of the West. She doesn't bother dodging their attack, instead she simply chooses to tank their hits while continuing her onslaught. Due to her immense Yoki, which results in an almost divine level of healing, Day comments that her ability to regenerate is akin to the power of creation. He speculates that instead of regenerating in the traditional sense, she is simply creating a new mass to replace what she lost. In her final fight against Teresa, she is seen purposely destroying her own legs in order to create fresh new ones. She does this in order to power up to keep up with Teresa's speed. This confirms that not only does she regenerate new body parts but the regenerated body parts are adapted to be even stronger and to compensate for their previous weaknesses. She also uses this technique to evolve even further when she is seen adding extra limbs and increasing her size in order to combat her foes. She is also able to extend her fingers to turn them into tendrils to slash and impale her opponents. She can also create these tendrils from her wings and use them to a similar effect as we see her doing against Dao. This power is the primary reason she's the apex predator of the Claymore world. Universal absorption. Priscilla is able to absorb both inanimate and animate objects into her being. When it comes to absorbing organic materials, she does so by devouring them. She is seen devouring Cassandra and gaining her abilities, which she then uses to devour the other two awakened beings, Kronos and Octavia. The beings she absorbs are manifested in the form of Hydra-like heads. She is able to use all the abilities of the beings she absorbs. It is to be noted, though, that if she weakens, these absorbed beings can break free from her as they continue to maintain their consciousness even while absorbed. At some point, she also states that she had absorbed her Claymore, assimilating it into her body. She uses this in her battle against the Reefal-like awakened one. Since it's inorganic, her adversary is not able to absorb any Yoki from it, allowing Priscilla to outmaneuver and kill her. She uses this again in her fights with the remaining Claymores and Raki. She also uses her powers of absorption to aid in her recovery when she's pushed into a corner. She is not only able to absorb the abilities and properties of her enemies, but she also absorbs their life force. This gives her a second wind while fighting her enemies. This is normally only used as a last resort because up until the very end, she had no reason to rely on the powers of others as she was sufficiently strong just on her own. As she displays an almost arrogance when it comes to her powers, she would consider it beneath her to resort to this unless desperate. Master Swordsman. Due to her overwhelming strength, it's easy to forget that Priscilla is a master swordsman who was once ranked the second strongest warrior in the organization. During her time as an awakened being, it seems that she not only kept those skills but honed them even further. In combat, she's seen taking on all 7 surviving Claymores of the Northern Assault, all of whom are powerful enough to be ranked within a single digit. And all the while, she was keeping track of 2 single-digit awakened beings, Kronos and Octavia, and an abyssal one. She implies that she's able to do this without relying on her Yoki sensing abilities, simply utilizing her superior battle senses. This is confirmed when, in the midst of her combating all these foes, she's able to fatally wound Tabitha, who had suppressed her Yoki and intended to attack Priscilla from behind. She is easily able to overwhelm and overcome the sword techniques of all these powerful Claymores easily, surpassing them without much effort. Her sword technique was so overwhelming that Miria even considered it to be the most perfect technique in all of history. Can Priscilla procreate? Since all Claymores go through the horrifying procedure where they are embedded with Yoma parts, it's stated that they can regenerate and even reattach limbs and body parts to an extent. However, for some reason, they cannot heal the wounds from their surgery, which extend from their neck down to their nether regions. They're basically held together by surgical stitches. Looking at the nature of their wound, they are more than likely missing their wombs. Further, with the organization wanting to maintain a monopoly in the creation of Claymores, they would never make it so that a Claymore could be reproduced. Though Priscilla is an anomaly in various ways, we feel that this is one thing she cannot circumvent, especially since her awakening, as there is no mention or record of another awakened being ever reproducing. Is Priscilla immortal? Technically, even as a Claymore, Priscilla can be considered immortal in the sense that she will not succumb to disease or age, just like her comrades. Even normal Claymores are able to regenerate or reattach their limbs using their Yoki or with the aid of their comrades. This is even more true for the defensive types who have very strong latent healing factors. We see Miria return back to her former self with minor scarring after being hacked to pieces by her fellow Claymores when she goes to incite a rebellion to prove this point. The only time a Claymore dies is if she runs out of Yoki to aid in her regeneration, or she doesn't have a comrade to aid in her healing. Coming to Priscilla, not only does she have near limitless Yoki as a Claymore, making the above statements even more true for her, but as an awakened being, her Yoki is further amplified. We've already spoken about her insane healing factor, which can almost be considered the power of creation instead of regeneration. Honestly, were it not for her innate desire to die, we feel that Priscilla would be truly immortal. In the series, she does die at the hands of Teresa in the very end, but we feel it's only because, despite her overwhelming power, her human side stunted her from fully realizing her potential. Therefore, for all intents and purposes, she is immortal, and it takes her own subconscious search for death and a foe far stronger than her to ultimately lead to her demise. Marvelous verdict! While there are many characters in Claymore with a sad backstory, Priscilla is perhaps the most tragic, even compared to Claire. Betrayed by the very person who was supposed to protect her and having to undergo horrible trials and tribulations to finally become powerful, she was never in control of her own destiny. By becoming a Claymore, she does gain the power to never be put in that situation again, but even if that power is hers, she's not the one truly in control. It's ironic that the only semblance of control she has at the moment of her awakening is when she's able to create that wedge which prevents her from hunting little girls in the hopes that one of them will rise to end her misery. Unlike the rest of her kind, her motivation is neither power, flesh, nor territory. That's not to say she isn't malevolent, as her driving force is her unending well of hatred. This hatred is believed even by her to stem from her encounter with Teresa, but we later discover that while this might not be entirely false, her true hatred originated in the self-loathing she felt for herself. It's definitely one of the most unique takes we've ever seen on a villain. For most of the series, she's just this overarching, looming threat who, in the 14 years of her existence, goes on a rampage for less than half of that time. Despite this, the sense of dread and foreboding that she generates in the audience is equal to some of the most well-written villains out there. In the end, even as her body gets destroyed, her soul is saved, finally finding peace and ending her tragic story. We're planning to cover a lot more of Claymore in the future, including character analyses, lore breakdowns, and theories, so let us know your thoughts on Priscilla and the rest of the Claymores in the comments section down below. It really helps us figure out what we're going to make videos out of and what we won't. Either way, be sure to keep an eye out for those videos on our channel, and thank you for making it to the end of this video. This is Wheezy249 signing off, but you can always find me on Twitch, so stay safe out there and have a marvelous day.